Welcome, everyone, to the Resonate podcast. I'm Aideen, and my guest today is Nancy Boss. Nancy is a voice and performance expert, founder and CEO of StudioBos Media. She empowers people to overcome the fear of using their voices on stage, speaking up at meetings, or even in their personal life. And she does that through working with a person's subconscious saboteurs. Nancy is also the author of several best selling books, including her latest, Singing Through Change Women's Voices in Midlife, Menopause, and Beyond. You're very welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm really honored. You're just like such an inspiration to me, with especially writing all those amazing books. And you've been just having had an amazing career around voice. Tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
Well, the journey started when I was the kid in my small town who was the best singer, who usually got the solos, and decided then that, well, then if I'm such a singer, if that's how I'm identified, then I should probably go to school for singing, right? And that didn't go so well because I started to get severe performance anxiety. It started actually when I was in junior high. I actually got to do a TED talk about this, but my performance anxiety started as related to piano and flute, but it transferred over to my singing voice, and I wasn't able to complete my college degree in singing. I switched to arts administration, graduated from college, couldn't find a job in arts administration, and eventually managed a Lady Foot Locker store. It wasn't until yeah, it wasn't until 12 years later that and I was working in music. I became a voice teacher at the age of 28. So I was the voice teacher who loved to sing and loved working with my students, but I felt like a fraud because I couldn't actually perform because of the severe performance anxiety. So at age 35, at age 34, I realized I need to overcome this. I do not want to go to my grave with this issue. And that's when I discovered the things that you and I share, that we know that we can help people empower their voices by helping them understand the root of their fear. And that's what happened for me. And that's what we help people do now.
It's so interesting because I also didn't get to do what I wanted to do with singing. And I actually wanted to do acting straight out of school and was discouraged. And then always wanted to do something with music, but it wasn't my own performance anxiety. It was actually a belief in my mind that you can't do that. That music is not a relevant career. It's not something that you should put your time into. And I also went back to college in my 30s to study music. But even then, it was like, putting blood out of a stone. It's like, oh, two steps forward, five steps back. So it's interesting when we have a creative passion or something that drives us. It can take us on an interesting journey, especially when there are
Yes.
roadblocks along the way.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's such a vulnerable thing, right? And so when we're a creative performer live and in the moment, holy cow, if you don't have your mindset lined up, that can be a deal killer. There are people whose mindsets are not lined up who do just fine. And so this isn't impacting everyone the same way. But with you and me, that was what it took. So it sounds like with yours it was a money mindset maybe.
Hmm.
With me, it was more of a fear of rejection, of judgment, different fears, but basically that bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that is survival. Can I survive doing this? And our subconscious has thought, no, no, we can't.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, there's a pull to do it. And then
Hmm.
there's this internal struggle. And I don't think we're the only people to experience internal struggles. I think most of the listeners will have had some as they went along. Tell me what approach you took then when you started to really decide to face that performance anxiety. Where did you go to get that help?
Yeah, the steps that I took are pretty basic steps that most people would have to go through. So I'm happy to share them. The first one is to find the source of the problem. And some people call this shadow work, some people call this personal narratives, other people call it, in my case, subconscious saboteurs. But what it is there's a story, oftentimes from your childhood, but maybe not, maybe from your adult, that has caused you some trauma or deep fear around what you're trying to pursue. So you have to discover that story, look at it, and decide if it is worthy of you having the fear anymore. For me, absolutely not. I did my discovery through hypnosis. So I had a hypnotist who helped me discover these childhood stories. There's other ways to tackle that, though, with therapy or other spiritual practices. After that, after you've seen that story, so that every time it pops up in your head, you can say, no, 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 you don't get to own the day. No, go away. You don't make sense. You don't belong. You have to do that consciously, though, because in both of our cases, it sat in our bodies for over 10 years, right? And
Hmm.
so this fear response is now completely habituated into our bodies and the way that we react. So it will keep popping up. And each time it pops up and you fight it back, it gets weaker and weaker until it doesn't show up anymore. So that is what is traditionally called exposure therapy. And that's when you just keep doing it until you get over the illogical reaction. And then the third piece for me, and I think this is not essential, but I do advise it of people, is to have somebody that you greatly admire who believes in you even more than you do sometimes. So for me, I had two different mentors. One was a choral director and one was my singing teacher, who both knew that I needed to be up there on the stage and that I deserved to be, and this was what they wanted me to do. And who was I to question these two people of tremendous authority and power? And so having that kind of belief was the last step so that I no longer get nervous at all in any situation that I've been in when it comes to using my voice.
Hooray!
Yay! Check. I won the day. And so that's the three in a nutshell. It's finding out what the source is, and disarming the source, and then exposure therapy. And then on top of that, if you can have somebody that in moments of weakness, because it never actually completely goes away, it's
Mm.
somebody else's voice that's encouraging you. That's the three steps.
Wow, that's like the magical formula.
That's the magical formula for me, at least. Yep.
But I think awareness does bring a change regardless. Just the awareness gives you a choice.
Hmm. If
And
you
that,
want to face it or not,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So when like often I'd say to people that when I teach singing, it's I all I want to do is give people choices because we have so many ways that we can actually do things. We might think that that classical guitar can only be played for classical music, but I can tell you, put it in the hands of a rock and roller, they will get rock and roll out of that guitar. And we have choices to express ourselves in different ways at different times, but we don't feel we have that choice.
Yeah, we have every choice. I believe that each of us was put here in this lifetime, in this body, for a purpose. I know not everyone believes that, but still, it's a heck of a lot more fun. Even if you're an atheist who thinks there's no purpose, it's a lot more fun to think you have a purpose. Pick something and stick with it. So, thinking that you have the purpose is really the power behind empowerment. The formula that I use is that fear plus excitement equals stage fright or performance anxiety or anything else in life like it, actually. If you have excitement to do this, that is a positive energy. It's fabulous. You're excited. If at the same time you have fear, those two energies clash and they create the friction that is nervousness. That's how I
Mm,
picture it in my head. So if you have fear and excitement, you get nervousness. And the example that I would use is if I were afraid to jump out of an airplane with a parachute, and yet I really want to do it, which this is true. This is true in me. I am both freaked out and super excited at the same time. Therefore, I am justifiably nervous and I have not signed up and paid to do it yet because of this nervousness, right?
yeah.
If it were just excitement, if I had already jumped out of a plane 20 times and I knew that it was amazing, there's no fear, I'd just go and do it another time, and the fear is eliminated. So, any place in our lives that we're experiencing fear, we need to look at it and we can, as you say, choose to disarm the fear so that the nervousness goes away.
When I can bring this back to the other point you were making about purpose and empowerment, because the time that I jumped out of a plane,
For real?
for real, in tandem with someone,
Yes.
it was a charity, it was for charity. So that gave a purpose to me, basically. And you don't jump out of a plane, by the way, anyone who's thinking about it. You literally throw yourself off the plane, you fall out of the plane. And
You
I
have to
was
take
very
that step,
nervous.
though. Ah.
Well, you step onto the plane in order to fall off the plane. I was sitting there breathing, just like, oh, I'm on a plane. This is interesting. What a beautiful
Tricking
view.
yourself. Yes.
Yeah, I was just, staying as present in the pre fall out of the plane moments. And then it was too late. I had to just go for it. It was like, here you go, off you go. So
Yes, nice strategy.
finding that purpose
Mhm.
can be a really positive way to disarm
Yes.
the fear. And I know that that's very true for me in my working life, that when I realized how important I felt finding someone's voice or helping someone understand the value of their own voice, and that it really, really matters, that each of us, our voices really matters, even if we've never spoken before,
Mhm.
even if we've been completely silent, your voice still matters. When I realized the depth that I believed, that purpose in me took away a lot of my fear of putting up social media posts and doing little videos and all the things that, as a business owner, I had to confront in some way. And I believe that those pieces of us that help us find our purpose can be a bit more obvious than we realize, because they all really come back down to, what do I value? What matters to me? And the message that you want to bring to the world that matters to you could be the key to overcoming any fears you may have.
Absolutely. I completely agree that I I believe, yes, we can just treat the symptoms of the fear. For instance, your being mindful in the airplane is similar to when I did have severe performance anxiety. One time, I was 23, I think, 24, and I needed to perform because I was part of this choir and the it's a tiny little solo. I pretended that I was in what at the time was called a holodeck, a 3D chamber where the audience was entirely made up and I wasn't really there, right? And so that was me treating the symptom of the fear in the moment, but not getting to the root cause.
Hmm.
But when you have purpose that's greater than yourself, that's higher than anything else, then your ego gets out of the way. All those fears are ego based. The fears are not coming from your greater purpose, they're not coming from your soul and your spirit. So when you can let your purpose shine through, yes, the fears tend to melt away. And you can actually live a fear free life if you are elevated enough in your purpose and your mission.
Mm, I love that. I can't say I'm fear free 100% of the time, but it certainly has changed the way that I operate. And I tend to fall out of more metaphorical planes than I ever did. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll just do this now.
Woohoo! What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, it's like that, really it is. And so tell me a little bit about the kind of books you've written and the kind of work that you're most passionate about.
The first book that I wrote was Singing 101, and I wrote that as a CD set back in 2005 for people to listen to in their cars. And about 12 years later, transcribed it and self published it. And that little book, now 6 years old, it sells so well. It's only 70 pages, but it is an impactful 70 pages on how to carry your body for optimal singing, breathing, resonance, posture, um, in very simple language. That has been quite a gift. It actually I had to put away my ego to publish a simple 70-page book. But it was what I was called to do, and it has been a gift to me and many, many, many other people. Otherwise, I've written the Teen Girl Singing Guide because so many teenage girls have so much passion around singing and they don't know what to do with it. And so that book actually outlines potential paths based on the Myers Briggs personality types. My friend is going to be in the musical. Should I be in the musical? I want to sing lead in a rock band, but my mom doesn't want me to. Should I? Should I major in music in college? That kind of discussions with these Myers Briggs characters, cartoon characters, walking through the book with the girls. Um,
How
then came,
fascinating.
it was a lot of fun to write. I will say it's because my daughter, who's now 24, about 12 years ago, she got a chronic illness that kept her from going to school for years. And so, with me suddenly being a homeschooling mom and taking her to medical appointments, I wasn't able to teach very much, but I held on to six teenage girls, and they would cycle through. They stay for a few years or 4 years, and then the next one, and all of them had basically the same questions. And so I realized, they could use a guide, all of them.
I'm so glad you did that because that's just so powerful. And to bring it down to your strengths as well, to
Mhm.
start to help a young person understand that they have natural strengths that they can lean into rather than looking at their favorite version of what they want to do and try to
Right.
follow that path.
Yes, figuring out who they are and what their path is. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that young kids and especially teens actually have instincts to what they would like to do that a lot of
Mhm.
adults don't give enough
Mm.
significance to. And I really, that makes me so sad because I feel like when we're around, in our teens and we start to have these, we discover what we're curious about or what we're
Yeah.
passionate about. Those
Mhm.
things can lead us on really distinctive and interesting journeys with careers
Mhm.
that, and prosperous careers as well that maybe aren't typical, but could be very rewarding. And I hope any parents listening give space for that for their own kids.
Absolutely. I think that I am the first probably professional singer in the entire history of my family. So there's no precedence for that. But also thinking historically, it's only in the last, I don't know, 60 years that people born in first world countries actually get to do whatever they want to do. And so no wonder there's cultural narratives that hold us back.
Mm.
There's still the cultural narratives, unfortunately, that women should be teachers, that doctors and lawyers make the most money. Both of those statements are untrue now. They may have been true in 1945, but they're no longer true. And so we have to be willing to look at those cultural narratives and decide if they actually fit or not, just like our personal narratives.
Yeah, and it comes down to that whole thing of even how our mind is wired. And a
Mhm.
lot of parents that have never seen someone who works as a scriptwriter for a movie, they're not going to think that their kid can do it because they've never met anyone who's ever done that job. So, but there's a lot more opportunity out there if we go looking for it, I think.
Absolutely.
And I'm a great believer in being in the industry that you find riveting and exciting. So if
Mhm.
you love music, you don't necessarily need to be on the stage. You can be the stage manager, you can be the press officer for a band. I feel like getting into the right industry is can be very rewarding in itself.
Absolutely. Some of my high school students have gone on to work in Nashville and LA as booking agents or for booking agents. And so they know talent because they are talent, but they don't want to be in front of the microphone. They want to be behind the desk.
Oh, that's just so good. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. I'm just so glad that I'm just so glad that your book is reaching that age group.
Yeah.
So good. Yay. Tell us more about your other books.
Well, the one that most recent I wrote with two colleagues, Joanne Bozeman and Kate Fraser Neely, and it is called Singing Through Change: Women's Voices in Midlife, Menopause, and Beyond. And this is giving empowerment and permission to women on the other side of the spectrum, not the teen girls, but the older women who find that their voices have changed because of changes to estrogen and progesterone during their midlife years, and then some aging voice issues as well. And especially women in their 40s oftentimes start to notice little changes to their bodies and to their voices that get worse as they get closer to menopause, or they just get their voices maybe even get better. And then all of a sudden, like mine did, fall off what's called a hormonal cliff, where everything was going great. And then in a period of 3 months, I needed a microphone in order to sing over a pit orchestra, which I'd never needed in my life. So um, the uh, the book has been really amazing, especially with the emergence of menopause as being something that we can and should talk about, because half of the world's population goes through menopause, and so this has been quite a ride with singing through change and the impact that it's having.
Oh, it's so great because I joined a choir, but when I moved to a new place, and yes, wasn't doing anything in the community until I joined this choir, and there are people in that choir that have been in the choir for 40 years. And there's quite a number of there's a row of white-haired people, and they sing just as well, some of them, as the younger people. And then
Wow,
there
great.
are a couple that maybe don't sing, they don't have as much control or whatever, but they
Hmm.
are all singing at pitch. They're all
Hmm.
able to keep up. And I just find it fascinating. I got a ride from my home to choir, and my my choir friend is 94 and she's giving me a ride to choir, and she's been in the choirs her whole life. And I just think there's so much value to being involved in something like that for that longevity too.
That at any age, the physical therapy of singing in a choir is worth it as well. You know, the lung expansion and the flexibility that's required and the mental flexibility and just sharing your spirit with other humans and trying to cooperate, being in a team instead of being independent. Fantastic reasons to stay in a choir. But I will say there's a difference between aging voice and menopause voice, because any woman can go into menopause at any point in her life after puberty. It can be caused by some kind of physical issues or chemotherapy in your teens, 20s, or 30s. Early onset menopause happens to women in their 30s, where they actually enter menopause. And menopause has a really big effect on the vocal folds. And
Mm.
so, yes, aging voice is a huge issue. Menopause is a separate issue that really can be a problem for some women, not all, but some.
Yeah. So yeah, but this is really great that you're writing about this and talking about this. And a lot of people, it doesn't matter, male or female, we sometimes use our voice or sing and don't like what we hear, right? And that can be really frustrating. So people who would like to speak in a certain way or speak in front of groups, or they want to start singing, they just don't know how to hear what they would like to hear, or they might hear what they'd like to hear sometimes and not at other times. Do you have any advice for anyone like that?
Well, I'm listening to that and hearing that there's judgment involved, right? That they're judging their voices to be unworthy. And anytime that we're looking at judgment, it's worth asking why. Why am I feeling like a judgment is appropriate right now? Uh, I like to give the extreme example of, do you sound better than Willie Nelson? Now, Willie Nelson is a US based country singer with a gravelly voice. He can only sing a half dozen notes before he has to take a breath. And yet, that man has made millions of dollars, and he impacts people every day with his voice. So, if you sound better than Willie Nelson, then there is nothing stopping you from putting your voice out there. So, why do you feel you need to judge yourself?
Mm,
If, on the other hand, there is something about your voice that is getting in the way, maybe it's painful, or you don't have enough stamina, or enough people have told you that your voice is a problem that you want to listen to them, there are so many voice coaches. There are speaking voice coaches, stage voice coaches, and singing voice coaches. You can put in just a little bit of effort and you'll have the confidence that you need going forward.
yeah. I've been working a lot with voice and breath because I feel like I've been talking to people who mainly want to improve their speaking voices
Hmm.
and asking them to hum a phrase that they'd normally speak and to feel the connection between the words, because there's just something very melodic in some people's voices that makes you feel very comfortable and very
Hmm.
relaxed, and you can really absorb the information they're saying. And then sometimes things are a little disjointed or which can feel a little bit harder to absorb information. Would you have that opinion too, or a different way of looking
Yeah.
at it?
I wonder if what you're saying is true for people who don't sing actively. Are they less attached, to those vocal skills? There is, with our neurology, with our brains, there is a separation that is possible between speaking and singing. But those of us who sing actively, we have more of a bridge between singing and speaking. So it's much easier for us to access the colors and emotions of our voices.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Very interesting. I love it. The
I hear the
colors, and when
intrigue.
you said the word colors, the colors of your voices,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. And I really feel like if we think of our voice purely as an instrument, that, it can be used in different ways. And with skills, it can be used with more skill. And I think that people forget this. They sometimes think that, oh, you either have a good voice or you don't.
And a lot of our voice is learned from modeling the people who raised us, right? However, they
Mhm.
spoke is going to have a big influence in how we speak. Well, if you don't put any conscious thought into it, that will remain in place for the rest of your life. But if you do put conscious thought into it, then absolutely you can have control over how your voice sounds. Now, I had an interesting conversation with a woman just last week. She works for me as an intern. She lives in Nigeria. She wrote an article for me for World Voice Day. And in that article, she said that as a Black woman raised in Nigeria, like everybody else in school, they had special teachers who taught them to speak white. But now she chooses to use her own voice. Oh, they actually had speaking coaching in her high school in Nigeria for all of the students. Interesting.
That's so interesting. And so interesting that she labels it as speaking white versus
White.
speaking black as well.
Yep, with a capital W, I will add.
That scares me a
Whew.
little bit.
I know it's a little uncomfortable.
It is.
Nonetheless, the point taken that she has learned by her culture how to speak, but then was taught to speak a different way, and she's fluent in both. And that is something that we can all do. I did take voiceover lessons for a while. So singing lessons are very different from voiceover lessons. It's fascinating.
Why? Tell me more.
In singing lessons, you're taught to elongate your vowels, right? And so if I speak like I sing, I will elongate my vowels and drop my jaw. However, for voiceover, they usually want a casual voice. And so you use your consonants more and you go ahead and just end a phrase when it's done. You don't try to stretch things out. Much less formal. And I really had to learn how to not enunciate quite so well for voiceover work.
Especially if you've been in a choir. I think I've
Mm.
had to help people to unlearn, and I've had to
Yes.
relearn it for the choir recently. Speaking German with extra pronunciations was fun, actually. It was fun. But I've always loved languages. And so if we think of the way we speak in terms of like just about connecting with the person in front of us and using what will help you to communicate with the individuals you're with. And then if you have people with you that are multiple, cultural backgrounds, then there might be
Yes.
some translating needed. But to me, it's about, matching how we communicate with what we feel will be received, right?
Yes, you're back to purpose. What's your purpose in being there? There's one very famous speaker right now by the name of Seth Godin. And Seth Godin has a huge influence on the world of business and entrepreneurs. And yet he has kind of a small, tinny voice. And if Seth cared about his voice, if he was at all worried about it, it wouldn't be out there making the world a better place. His purpose is greater than his ego around his voice. And that's what I would wish for everyone, that your purpose takes front and center so that your fears just fade away.
I'm basically saying hallelujah here in the background. On that note, I think that that is a perfect ending for our session today. But I would like to invite you, Nancy, to is there anything you also want to say to the listeners today?
Wow, we've covered so much ground, and I'm glad we came back full circle to purpose and fear. We In some cultures we talk about the voice as the fifth chakra. It's a place that's known to be a place where your energy can be blocked. And any of us who have felt that tightness in our throat or just can't get the words out, whether that's in an important conversation with someone you love or your boss or from a stage, we know that feeling of fear when it sits in the throat. But it's also telling us that there's something really important there that's causing excitement, or we wouldn't have that friction. So dig a little deeper, look into that fear. Don't just accept that that's the way it's supposed to be. Dig a little deeper and find out what is holding you back and why. Does it make sense? Or can you get rid of it and just go ahead and do what you need to do?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a path forward for each of us. And what is in our hearts that we want to say,
Yeah.
it really deserves to find an outlet.
Yeah, it
So
does. And the heart and the brain, the throat is right between those two. So a lot of times this tension is caused by the heart and the brain disagreeing. And so they need to agree.
yeah, and this, I mean, I know we're finishing up now, but it also comes down to sometimes what we feel in our body, or we feel like that in our throat. We need to acknowledge what's happening physically, and our brain then can go, "Oh, there's more to this than meets the eye."
Absolutely. The body is so wise. It's worth listening to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for being here. I will be putting your website and contact information in the show notes. And I would encourage people to follow Nancy, buy her book. If you have a teen girl, go get that book for them. And we are so pleased that you've taken the time to listen to us today. It is an honor that our voices are being heard right now. Every voice needs someone to listen. And if you've been listening to us, we thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.